And we're live. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Fastest 40. We're streaming live from the Atlas Saloon here in Excelsior Springs. Got people starting to trickle in. Food's getting set up. Jim, that gumbo is smelling good. So I know I'm excited to get everything kicked off. The atmosphere is going to be electric here for the game for sure. So we're going to make sure we get you geared up for it. Trey, how we feeling?
I'm feeling good, man. It's gonna be another Sunday with Chiefs football. Looking forward to a little bounce back here against the Patriots, a team who is struggling themselves all season, and Chiefs need one to kind of get back into the loop of things
Slump
and make
buster.
things happen. Yeah, in December here. So we got a couple games left to kind of rebuild, get recalibrated really into the last quarter of the season here, so that we can dive into January kind of rolling strong. So a big week. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to being down here at the Atlas. I'm gonna have a lot of friends down here. Gonna be a lot of good friends and beers and food
Oh yeah.
and it's gonna be a good time. So yeah.
And Bloody Marys,
Yeah,
that's right.
Jamie's got the Bloody Mary going so far this morning to kick things off for him. So he's gonna recalibrate for his last quarter of the season here too.
Not to mention, it's freaking beautiful out here today,
Yeah,
man.
yeah,
The sun's shining. I don't know if you guys could tell the difference between the last live show we did out here. It was a little rainy, I think, or
Yep.
at that time, or maybe it was
Yep.
even we were getting some snow for the Denver game. So
Yeah.
that mountain snow
Oh
was
yeah,
blowing
yeah,
our
that's
way.
right. Yep.
But it's gorgeous here in Kansas City. So going to be a lot of fun today. We'll kind of go through the comings and goings of the AFC going into Week 15. A lot of playoff hopes and dreams on the line. Talk about some Chiefs news as always. What's going on with
Yep.
our team here in Kansas City. And then we'll give you a little preview as we kind of roll into the game. So we'll start with the AFC landscape. Of course, shout out to our partners at eCoffee. You can check them out at www.eeroastscoffee.com. Numerous coffee blends, including their holiday blend. A lot of good stuff there where you can get your stocking stuffers in and try their espresso. That's like the staple in our house is some e-coffee espresso. So
Oh yeah.
definitely give them a shot. KC local, of course. So www.eeroastcoffee.com. Big news last night with Denver. They were right on our heels for the AFC West, sitting at
Yeah.
7-6, one game back.
Out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere, just kind of went on that 6-game burner. Sean Payton get those guys working.
Yep.
They fell short last night. Detroit did us a favor, so that was big for sure. Kind of a blowout situation there. Their offense was clicking. I think they put up like 42 points or something like that.
Yeah, Detroit. Yeah, they look pretty good. After a couple of rough weeks for Detroit, that was, and to come back to and play a good game against a Denver team who, like you said, has rattled off a pretty solid
heater.
6 weeks. So for Chiefs fans, it was a great turnout last night for the game. You know, obviously we want to do whatever we can on the field, but if anybody can help us out and beating any of those division opponents or
Right.
conference opponents, we're going to take that as well too. So
Any chance we
thank
get.
you, Detroit, for pulling one out for us. Kind of separates ourselves a little bit more from Denver, and now we got to take care of business today against
Right.
New England and Bill Belichick. So big game for us. But yeah, I mean Denver. One thing I do want to talk about with that game, Dan, is the offsides call, the offensive offsides call. I don't know if you saw that last night.
Yeah, right there in goal line
Yeah,
scenario.
4th and goal. So it's a huge call, but called on the right guard, and it's kind of looking back, it's nothing close to what we saw with Kadarius Toney, right? What we
Yeah.
saw with the Chiefs, but there's been a few more calls for a few more offensive offsides calls than just this and within the last week since that
Yeah.
was called. But this one, I mean, clearly not offsides, man. It wasn't even really close.
Nah.
His head was, maybe over a quarter of the backside of the football, but not over the football at all. And it's another one of those plays or another one of those penalty calls that were called where it affected the game, right? So they ended up kicking a field goal instead of potentially getting that touchdown there on 4th and goal. So another huge mistake by the officiating crew that officiated that game last night. And I just think another from the fans, another thank you to Roger Goodell.
And I think, I know it's on the agenda to talk about the officials a little bit more as we kind of move through the show, but it just shows the inconsistency. I mean, even the calls that are supposed to be black and white, like there's a line, you don't cross it in certain situations. And if a player crosses it, great, call it consistently, or, if they're not across the line, have the wherewithal to know that they're not across. Like
Right.
it should be pretty simple when it comes to officiating on that side of things.
Yep.
It's not like you're having to hit super slow-mo on some defensive coverage to see if there's a DPI. It's right there in front of you.
Yep. Yep.
And that's been the argument all week about, folks talking about the Chiefs and Kadarius Toney in that lineup situation. Well, it was right in front of the refs in that instance too, and they couldn't tell whether or not the damn guy was offsides or not.
Right.
So I mean, what
Right.
are we talking about here? Like,
Yep. It's almost like that was a justification call, right? So the league at this point is trying to justify their call that they had against the Chiefs and Kadarius Toney, and whether they were right or wrong, we've hashed that one out for a week at this
right.
point, but this
We
one
know
was
he
so
was
blatant,
offsides.
right? This one's so blatant that you don't that it was is a justification call, right? Like we were right a week ago, and we're going to continue making this call. I guarantee we'll see a lot more today, and moving throughout the rest of the season, I guarantee we see a lot more offensive offsides calls just to say, hey, we've been doing this all season. You guys just saw it against the Chiefs. That's why it's an issue now. So,
Right.
but the proof is there. Proof's in the pudding. Those calls haven't been made all year, and they're just getting hot now. So, yeah, I mean that was even against a division opponent for us, right? And
Yeah.
it's worked out for us, but
It
at the
worked
same
out.
time, right? Like it's tough to watch, but
No, it is. It impacts the product at the end of the day. Moving through the AFC, we'll get back to more of that here a little bit later. But Chargers, man, we came out here Thursday night for a game at the Atlas, and ended up being a ton of fun watching that game. A lot of points scored. Unfortunately, it was just one team in that scenario. Raiders put up 63 points to down the Chargers on Thursday night. Brandon Staley, Tom Telesco, Friday morning, get their walk-in papers out there in LA. I mean, we all saw the writing on the wall with that one. What's been most interesting is listening to some of the insiders that have the scoop on what's going on behind closed doors there with the Chargers organization. And a lot of it's pointing at the owner, from what I've heard at least, not being quite competent in those scenarios.
yep.
Dean Spanos being the owner of the LA Chargers there. And it's been clear that the NFL wants to establish a presence in LA, but the Chargers, man, they just constantly get the raw end of the deal.
Yeah.
They don't even have their own stadium. Most of the time when you're looking at a Chargers game, it's 60, 70, even 80% opposing fans.
Yep.
I mean, we saw on live television they had to run a silent count to run their own offense against the Cowboys. And it was like basically, Arlington West for them
right.
in that game. Who are they going to bring in? I have no idea, but that's going to be something that they have to figure out. And I was personally hoping Brandon Staley would be the coach of the Chargers forever.
Yeah,
but, unfortunately,
that would have worked out nice for the Chiefs. Yeah, so I mean, looking at that situation, that's kind of bittersweet, right? So you get the offensive firepower that they do have in LA, right?
Yeah.
There is opportunity there, but with the cap situation going into next year, I think it's gonna be tough for LA to build something within a year, right? So I think there's gonna have to be a long-term plan there in LA. Whatever coach or GM walks into that situation is gonna have to understand that, but at the same time, you get Herbert and potentially Keenan Allen and those guys that are Austin Eckler,
Joey Bosa. I mean,
right.
they're loaded.
Yeah,
for sure.
Right. And so I think you have to choose, is that worth it to, maybe have a couple 1 or 2 years to rebuild and kind of figure out the cap situation and kind of figure out the situation there in LA in general, right?
Only one way to go.
Yeah.
They're rock bottom. Right?
Yeah. So I mean, looking into next year, they'll probably be the favorite in the division, in May, because they always are.
The deal.
They'll win the off season.
Know the deal on that end.
They'll win the off season divisional championship, but
as usual.
Yeah. So Colts going into another game from yesterday. Colts down the Steelers. Steelers are on a slide here, who were at one point in the AFC playoff picture. They're kind of in the hunt at this point.
Yeah.
Looking on the outside, outside looking in. Yeah. So on 3-game slide for the Steelers. They got a lot of issues that we weren't sure if they're going to work it out. But I mean, to look at their season in general, they started the season pretty slow. They had a lot of issues up front and then kind of made a midseason run.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're hitting the tail end of the season here on a little bit of a slide. So it'll be interesting to see how they finish.
Who would have thought Kenny Pickett is the recipe for winning over there? Ever since he's been hurt, they haven't really been able to get it together on the offensive side of the ball. A team like Pittsburgh, they're defensive driven. They need a true game manager that's going to, ignite a fire in those guys. And I think that offense really does rally around him being a young guy anyway. Trubisky clearly was not that guy when they brought him in initially,
Yeah,
and they
right.
immediately turned tail to Pickett, and that's what allowed them to make that run they had last year as well. Some defensive injuries have kind of hamstrung them a little bit. I know TJ Watt's not 100% right now. He's the QB on the other side of the ball for that team. So they got some things to figure out. Tomlin's a phenomenal coach, obviously, and so I feel confident they'll tie some things together. Are they going to make the playoffs at this point? I'm not sure. I think that slide was pretty critical for them. We got some no's back here, but no, that's going to be a tough one. The Colts, man, Gardner Minshew, you got to give him props.
Everywhere he's been.
Don't take anything away from him.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy's the real deal. Whenever he does get an opportunity to step in, and let's talk about that nasty hit on Michael Pittman. Did you see that?
Yeah, yeah. I didn't watch it live, but I ended up seeing it later, and it really affects me more than just watching the game, right? Because he's my starting receiver on my fantasy squad. But it
Same
sucks.
here.
I mean, dude got smacked. I mean, that sucks.
And it's bang
he was
bang.
completely airborne.
Yeah.
And just got crushed. So it'll be interesting to see if guy bounces back. But kind of looking at the landscape of the NFL right now for receivers taking hits like that, there's been a lot of conversation about how it goes back to the quarterback, right? And how, years ago,
Right.
that was the conversation was if my receiver's getting cracked, it's because I made a bad throw as a quarterback or the
Yep.
quarterback made a bad throw, set him up.
Brady was talking about
Yep,
that,
yep,
throwing
yep.
his guys into those situations.
Yep. And so now that's been a conversation that's kind of came back up and where the responsibility lies in the backfield with the Crows to protect your receivers. And
Yeah.
I think now it's a lot different now because you see a lot of young guys out there and you see a lot of turnover at the cornerback or quarterback position where this guy has a one bad game. You're third string going into next week, right? Next guy up. So
Yeah.
you just continue to set these guys up for failure. I mean, we saw with Justin Jefferson last week. He got cracked in the ribs. And then you see with Michael Pittman, it had to lay out across the middle of the field where laying out across the middle of the field is a dangerous game. If you got
Especially
guys
when the
like Ed
defender's
Reed
going
or
for the
Brian
ball,
Hawkins
too.
coming in too. So, yeah, it's a different level of football, but I think, a lot of times the last several years, we forgot about the responsibility from the quarterback to protect their guys as well. So be interesting to see how that evolves.
And I don't know if you saw this either, but with Kareem Jackson, we've seen a lot of fines and even suspensions happening for him this year because of egregious hits, helmet to helmet hits. And essentially what Roger Goodell told him in his one-on-one in his sit down was that it is his responsibility as well to protect the offensive players, which I think is, I mean, that's a whole other conversation. He's got to be looking out for himself,
Yep.
the wide receiver, making sure he makes a good play on the
Right,
ball,
right.
and his teammates. I mean,
Right.
that's a lot to put on one defensive player. But that's essentially the gist of what came from that meeting on his account. That's his
Sure.
account
Yep.
of what
Yep.
took place in that meeting. And so the defenders, I mean, they're put in a really tough position where, even if I thought that I was able to watch that play, not live, in a clip,
Yep.
and it seemed to me Kazee, who was the defender on that hit, didn't even look like he was trying to make a play on Pittman or tackle him. He
Right.
was going for the ball
Yep.
to try and make an interception for
Yep.
his team and get the possession back for the offense. So, seeing that happen inadvertently and he still got ejected for that, it definitely, I think, solidifies what Kareem Jackson's account was in that meeting.
Sure, yeah, and it'll be interesting as the play is reviewed throughout the next week to see what kind of fines come his way because now we have time to review that play and determine, like you just said, is he making a play on the ball or is he trying to crack the dude on
Right.
the side of the helmet? So, I mean, I think that's going to make a difference in how things pan out for plays like that. But I think to that point, man, there has to be a certain level of accountability. The favor is always in the offense. The way the game has been changed throughout the last
All the
5 to 10 years.
rules.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's so much favor in the offense, and quite honestly, that's where the production comes from, and that's where the entertainment comes from, is the 70-yard bombs or the 65-yard running touchdowns or whatever it may be.
People get
right?
excited
So,
about the touchdown.
yeah, which I understand that, but at the same point, you got to have a fair playing field to have a good game, right? And
Yeah.
that's can't turn into flag football. So, and that's not what we want to see, right?
No.
Big hits are part of the game.
Right.
You understand that
That
playing
gets
the
me
game.
excited.
Yeah,
I don't
me
know
too.
about anyone
Yeah,
else,
I'm a
but
defensive guy. Yeah, I'm a
whenever we
defensive
see
guy.
someone blow up a screenplay in the backfield
Yeah.
or, stuff somebody at the line of scrimmage, like
Yeah.
that gets me excited
Oh
for
yeah,
sure. Or a
that gets you
sack on a
fired up.
play.
Yeah.
Now you got to worry about, whether or not you're putting your full weight on him and
Yeah.
does it look like I rolled off of him enough to
Right.
not draw a flag,
Right. Right.
those kinds of things.
Yep.
Unfortunately, all fall on responsibility of the defender.
Yep. So I'm looking at the Steelers and kind of moving into the playoff picture for the AFC. Kind of goes into the AFC North and how things have panned out in the AFC North,
Right.
and to talk about that, the Bengals. Are the Bengals? Do they still have an opportunity here? They won three straight with Browning
Yeah.
with their icy man going out earlier this year with the wrist injury, but it'll be interesting to see how that's going to pan out for the AFC North. Can the Bengals pull it together and continue this streak here? Honestly, it's not a team I really want to see in January,
But we're
with
going to
or
see him in
without Burrow,
January.
with or without Joe Burrow. But it's going to be interesting to see how the North pans out, because it's been a roller coaster ride for that division so far. But
Absolutely. I mean, they look great. The Bengals, showed that they had enough to get it done against Minnesota. Their back was against the wall and they showed up to the occasion and got the job done. Went to OT, ended up winning that game. I mean, that's definitely a team with a lot of grit. Browning being a quarterback that has a chip on his shoulder naturally, being cut a few different times before he got his opportunity there in Cincinnati. I think that's pretty great. No Jamar Chase at the end of that game as
yep,
well. So T. Higgins ended up being that primary guy for them moving towards the end of that game. Sitting at 8-6 without Joe Burrow. They're on a 3-game win streak right now. Cincinnati is. That's pretty impressive. All of those games being led by Jake Browning, of course. So, when they come to Arrowhead, that's obviously a game that we cannot overlook. I know the narrative has been, okay, the Chiefs are playing these four quarterbacks to end the
yep,
season,
yep,
right? Bailey Zappi, Jake Browning, Aiden O'Connell, and Easton Stick with the injury to Justin Herbert. And so everyone's thinking we're just going to have this cakewalk for these final four games. The Bengals are going to be a team that's going to come in hungry. Zach Taylor wants to win against us
right,
after what we
yep,
did last season. The Chargers, obviously, they haven't really shown anything that's going to give you any kind of pause. Aiden O'Connell and the Raiders, we were able to handle them after a big early jump, and then we'll see what happens with this Patriots team. I know Belichick's probably going to want to keep it close. We can
oh
talk
yeah,
about that later, but the Bengals are definitely a team that I think is going to give us a little more fits than what a lot of people might be expecting. I mean, think Packers, you know what I mean? When we came into that game, we're like, Jordan Love, not really concerned about what he's going to do as a
yep, yep,
quarterback, and he ends up having the game of his freaking life. So, I mean, that's just something that, as the Chiefs prepare for that scenario, they can't be looking into the playoffs just
yep.
quite yet. Like focus on that game.
Right, and to on the same point with the focus being on what quarterbacks we're going to play, the focus has also been on, hey, the Chiefs have one of the top five weakest schedules going into the rest of the season, right?
Right.
The Packers were a part of that conversation when we were talking about that a few weeks ago, and the Bills.
Yeah.
And so,
Who were 6-6 at the time.
yeah, and so things have panned out now to where it doesn't really matter who you're playing. It's week by week. We
Right.
need to focus week by week on what we got going
Well,
on.
the
So,
AFC is nuts. I mean,
yep,
top to bottom, I think there was 7-6 teams coming into this week.
yep,
A lot of key matchups this week. Houston playing Tennessee. No C.J. Stroud in that game. No Nico Collins.
yep,
So that's going to be a tough one for, Tennessee might end up pushing their way back up into the conversation
yep.
over these final weeks. The Jets and Miami play. Tyreek Hill, is he going to play? We don't know. Aaron Rodgers, is he going to play?
Yeah,
Don't know that one
yeah,
either.
all right.
So
He
that
might play cornerback.
he might play. He might play whatever. We might put him all over the field.
Yeah, right.
But those are all situations that are going to shake some things up. Dallas and Buffalo, big game for Buffalo to continue their playoff hopes.
Yeah,
They're outside looking in right now, and they really got to tighten up over these last few weeks. Big
yeah,
win over us, obviously, for them. And then Baltimore and Jacksonville, that's a huge game for AFC implications. You got your 1 seed Baltimore Ravens. You don't know if they're going to hold on to that. If we handle our business, if Miami handles their business, we could see a shuffling there.
yep,
And then with Jacksonville being the 4 seed holding on to the AFC South, the results of that Houston and Tennessee game are going to play into it. So
right.
a lot of shuffling that
Yes.
can still
Yep.
happen. And, that's the part of the AFC we are expecting. I think we were expecting the AFC to have a lot better records than what they have right now. But even those teams you weren't expecting a lot from, like Houston, they're coming out and they're performing and they're showing out, and
Right.
it's just gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
A lot of fun these last few weeks.
it's been a lot of fun to watch the AFC, and I would personally rather, as a fan, not as a Chiefs fan, but an NFL fan, I'd rather watch a close race all the way up until the end, right? You want to see
Yeah.
those teams that are in the hunt still have an opportunity to get a stretch here in December and make their way into the to 5, 6, or 7 seed,
Yeah.
which is always fun, man. Unless you're
Absolutely.
in the AFC West, you can guys those teams can lose the rest of the season, and I'll be
Yeah.
happy with that.
I mean, think about some of those playoff clinching scenarios that we've seen for the Chiefs the last few years. The Miami Dolphins and their miracle beating the Patriots so that we could get that first
Right,
round
right,
bye.
right. Yeah.
We saw another one a few years back with Matt Castle and company when we ended up making the playoffs that time. We had to get a perfect scenario where these three teams lose and this team wins so that we
Yep.
can get the tiebreaker to advance based off strength of schedule. Like, those are things that are going to come into play going into week 18.
Man, that's a good point. And I remember being at Arrowhead for that Miami New England game,
Oh,
and it finished like
I
I mean
missed it.
I think we had like 5 minutes left in the fourth, and that game finished, and
Yeah.
Arrowhead's just rocking because Miami pulled
Oh,
out.
yeah. They put the play. I remember I wasn't there, unfortunately, but I saw the play on the,
Yeah.
Jumbotron from somebody else's video on social media or something. And just the crowd was bananas.
Yeah, yeah. Those are that was that, I'm glad you brought that up. That was one of the most memorable games I've had. Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you set that one out.
Yeah, I got you, man. Next time.
Yeah. But to keep the show rolling a little bit, to jump into some specific Chiefs news, we're gonna bring this
Yeah,
thing with
baby.
Better Homes and Garden, specifically my wife Katie Lawrence. She's serving the Kansas City area for all your real estate needs. So if you're looking to buy, sell, or build a home, she's gonna take care of you within the KC metro area. So get a hold of Katie. Her number is 816-868-1920, and make sure she takes care of all that dirty work for you on the back end of buying and selling a home. So.
Hmm.
Dan, start this off with the Chiefs news. Travis Kelce, 8 straight seasons with 80 plus catches. Only 3 other guys have done that. Some pretty historical names here. We got Jerry Rice, Torrey Holt, and Marvin Harrison are the only other 3 to be able to conquer a feat like that. So we already knew Travis Kelce was tier 1 when it
Oh,
comes to
yeah.
tight ends, but to elevate that into a different receiver or into the receivers, right? Into
There's
some
no
of the
tight
best,
ends on that list.
right? Into some of the best that have
Yeah,
played the game as far as catching footballs. Jerry Rice, Torrey Holt, and Marvin Harrison. I mean, that's tier 1 company there. Obviously, we know Travis Kelce is going to be a first ballot,
yeah,
but I mean, just another notch on the belt for this guy, and
for sure.
um,
I
fun to
mean,
see, man.
that's like first team all hands. Those guys that
Yeah,
you
right,
listed.
right, right.
Marvin Harrison, Jerry Rice, they're in the Hall of Fame. They don't drop passes. Like,
Yep.
show me one highlight where they didn't catch
Yeah.
it, and I'd be surprised. Torrey Holt being another one of those guys. I think the big thing with this too is, like, he's still got a lot of time left. When you look at the grand scheme of things, he is 34, right?
Yep.
But 2 more seasons to stretch that record, and he's still on pace for like 1,200 yards, about 100 catches, and just shy of double-digit
Yep.
touchdowns.
Yep.
They talk about LeBron stats on their podcast all the time, New Heights. That's a LeBron stat for sure. And I think, putting him in a category of like a future
Yeah.
Hall of Famer, it's a big deal.
It
So,
is, yeah, it is. And to the conversation of Travis Kelce taking a step back, he's the number 1 tight end in receiving yards. So maybe he has taken a step back. I think we can agree that he looks up just slightly slower than he did last year, or years before, but he's still dominating the league as a
yeah.
tight end. There's no question about that.
I think the big difference is his open space ability, right? He's not getting as much yak as we typically see from him, yards after catch, but the separation's there. He's still beating, he's a constant mismatch for whoever's on him, right?
Yep.
The linebackers aren't quick enough to keep up with him, so he's getting that release, and the defensive backs aren't strong enough to outmuscle him in those situations. So as long as he's able to maintain that, I mean, even Jason Witten played until he was 40, and we were still seeing a lot of that stuff at, 37, 38.
Yep.
So,
Yep. Yeah, he's very good about making the first guy miss too. He
yeah.
always does that quick turnaround where the other guy's diving off this way and he's he's hitting a spin the other way, which he's very good about making the first guy miss. But
That spin move is just textbook.
yeah, it's so slow too, but it's so effective,
the
man.
slowest, most effective
Yeah,
spin in
right.
NFL history.
Yeah, I mean, it never gets old either. You can expect if Travis Kelce's catching that ball in open space, he's making the first guy miss. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you gotta love it. You gotta love it.
Beautiful. So linebackers, man, we got a lot of shuffling going on there. We should get Drew Tranquil back
Yep.
from the concussion this week. Nick Bolton obviously made his first appearance since like week 7,
Yeah.
coming off of IR, so that was big. A lot of shuffling, man. What do you think's going to happen there? Like, who gets the green dot at the end of the day? What's the deal?
I think the green dot has to go back to Nick Bolton. And that's only because what he's done the last couple seasons, not just this year, right? So
Right.
obviously he's missed some time, but he is the number one leader for this defense, and he will continue to be that guy. But I think Drew Tranquil has a role in the starting defense. There's no
100%.
brainer about it.
Yeah.
What we saw from Drew Tranquil while Nick Bolton was out was a starting middle linebacker for any other football team, right?
Oh,
So
man.
I think he's got a role. You know, I also think Willie Gay and Leo Chenal have a role in defense as well. I'm not saying those guys are gone, but
Right.
I think Drew Tranquil is a no-brainer on starting on the defense if he's ready to go. You know, obviously that's a big factor. He hasn't played, didn't play last week, and then went out of the game early against the Packers. But I think if he's ready to rock and roll, I think it's a no-brainer that you throw him in and get him into the rotation. And if he's ready to go, he starts for me.
I mean, his coverage ability was missed in that Packers game, right? What he can do over the middle, we've seen him make some really strong plays against tight ends, wide receivers, whatever the case might be. Having him on the field, I think, is a must. What I think we saw while Nick Bolton was out was a starting linebacker, like you said, but it had me wondering, like, how did we get the right to sign this guy? Because
Right.
his deal is relatively affordable, like 3-4 million for a linebacker in free agency of his caliber. You just don't see it too often on a 1-year deal. So getting him lined up for an extension, a lot of the debate with the cap situation, kind of what's been going on, what our future moves are going to look like, because we're going to have to make some hard decisions coming up, is whether or not we should extend Drew Tranquil. And if we do, what does that mean for Nick Bolton once his contract comes up?
Right.
And, that's definitely one of those conundrums that Brett Veach is going to have to figure out. Ideally, we keep them both.
Yeah, right.
But paying a middle linebacker is just a really tough thing to do on any roster, not just one where you're paying a quarterback about 50 some odd million a year.
Right. Yeah.
So, that's really tough. We see it in San Fran. We see it in Baltimore, where there's
Right.
linebackers getting high paid paychecks, right? I don't think those two guys are quite the level of Fred Warner or Roquan Smith just quite yet, but they're still young in their careers and they can evolve into that. So it's going to be tough.
Yeah,
It's going to be tough.
It will be. And I think to that point, there's going to be a lot of chatter going on in this offseason. Here come February and March on decisions being made, not only in the receiving core, but also on defense, right? We have a lot of guys who have an opportunity to
Yeah.
maybe go somewhere else and really cash the bag here, or stay with the Chiefs and kind of make a run. And, we're going to have to pay somebody at some point. But who's that going to be? We have those opportunities we're going to look at. And then obviously you and I are going to be talking through that in February and
In the off
March.
season.
Yeah,
Yep.
but something to look at, man. I'm excited to see a starting linebacking core with Drew Tranquil and Nick Bolton. If that's how Spags goes with the defense today, I think that's a must.
Yep.
But it's going to be, Spags is the D coordinator. He's had a phenomenal year, so whatever he goes with, I'm going to put some faith into that and
100%.
expect excellence.
Those are the
out
best
of the
results
defense. Yeah.
when we get those
Yep.
guys on the field. So
No, I agree 100%.
Fines, man. Plenty of them got dished out this week. Obviously, with the Buffalo Bills game, there was some fireworks at the end, and unfortunately, it wasn't the winning fireworks at Arrowhead. It was Patrick Mahomes exploding on the sideline. That carried over into the post game. We talked about it earlier this week with Andy Reid's comments, Mahomes' comments. I think it's a bunch of BS. Some of the stuff you're seeing on social media from people that already didn't like or were jealous of Patrick Mahomes and kind of the success going on there, saying they lost respect for him. Obviously, we talked about it on the show earlier this week. My only humbug was with his conversation with Josh Allen, just like shake his hand and get off the field and give it to the reporters, but
let those guys chew on it.
Yeah, let those media guys chew on that thing. But they paid for those comments at the end of the day. Andy Reid gets hit with a 6-digit fine, $100K. Patrick Mahomes gets $50K lighter in his wallet as well. And Goodell came out and defended the referees. Kadarius Toney got
Shocker.
interviewed. Yeah, right. Tony got interviewed, said he didn't get a warning all game from the officials. Obviously, they called it in a very critical time in the game. It's no debate that he was offsides. I think that's the most important thing to say right here. He was offsides. He was offsides multiple times in that game, but there was so much inconsistency with the way it was called.
Yep.
Clearly, they didn't call it at any point throughout that game until it became a win or lose scenario for the Chiefs. So, I think the players have a right to be upset about that. Not just in Kansas City, across the league, we're seeing this problem with inconsistency. We talked about it already. Fans, I mean, the product,
coaches, everybody,
the quality of the product is taking a hit at the end of the day, and people are getting really upset about it. And
thanks, Roger.
There's no way to hold the refs accountable in real time, or at least if there is, there's no visibility on that process. None.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm kind of shocked that the fines weren't flip-flopped. I kind of expected Andy to maybe take the lesser of the two, because I knew both of them were going to take a hit. I think the only point there is being that the NFL or Roger Goodell wanted to make a point to fine the head coach a little bit more, kind of make that statement that, hey, you're the leader of that organization.
Right.
You're going to eat the most of this because you are a part of it, but also you allowed it to happen, right? So
Right.
that's how I kind of portrayed that. But it's frustrating, when you have 95% of what makes up the NFL being the players, the coaches, and the fans frustrated the way something is being operated.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the NFL and or Roger Goodell on the other end being the 5% saying, no, this is the right way. This is how it is, right? So I think there's no accountability when it comes to front office NFL wise. But at the same time, organizations are going to have to adapt, because the NFL kind of makes the rules, and whatever they say is going to inevitably be how it goes, right? So it'll be interesting to see how it moves forward. Really frustrating to watch. I think we both agree he was offsides, like you said earlier, but
that's not the debate, though.
It's not. But he was offsides 5 or 6 times that game before that. And it was, like you said, he wasn't alerted at all.
Yep.
There's no communication between refs and Andy Reid, or refs and Kadarius Toney. And then it was called in a critical moment, just like it was last night with the Denver Broncos game, with the right tackle being called for offensive offsides as well. So moving forward, we know change has to happen with the officiating. I don't know what that is. If there's accountability on both ends, that's probably the way to get through it. Is, hey, we need to come to the middle, find a solution, as the middle being NFL and each team as an organization. But man, something's got to change. Consistency has to be there.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the integrity of the game that we're talking about, right? With the officials, right? They're supposed to uphold that neutrality throughout, and it's through the scope of the fans, through the scope of the players and the coaches. It's hard to see a neutrally officiated game when they're only choosing to call, whether it's a subjective call or whether it's a black and white call, like being over a line. They're only choosing to call it in critical situations, and that's where you get phrases like, the refs are trying to make it about themselves, or whatever the case is there. It's just about, making those calls throughout. And of course, no one wants to see a game where there's just laundry on the field the entire time. But that's also part of what Kadarius Toney, what a lot of other players were saying, is the officials are helping to coach those players up in those scenarios. The receiver checks with you, you say back up. You give them that alert if they're lining up near you or in that vicinity. That should be common practice. That's something that we've seen numerous times.
Every level of football too.
Every level. Exactly. Anyone that is lining up on a football field, they're going to get that courtesy from the officials. And it's just something that escaped that game in particular and is escaping the game as a whole right now. So
agreed. All right, Dan, let's run into Chiefs at Patriots, kicking off today at noon Central here. Game's in New England. We're traveling a bit here. So injury report as it sits right now, Isaiah Pacheco will not play with the shoulder. He did have surgery this year just to clean some things up. Looks like he'll be a quick recovery, though. I don't expect too many weeks for him to be out. As a matter of fact, I think I read something where he could practice next week. Justin Ross, he is out. Donovan Smith is out. Everyone else, it was a full practice as it was on Friday.
We're
So
gonna get some Wanye Morris at left
yeah,
tackle.
yeah, looking forward to it.
Oh man,
Yeah.
I love pancakes and
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nice pancake breakfast on Sunday morning. I
yeah,
love that
baby.
too.
Get the day started right.
Yeah. So, kick us off with the Patriots injuries here, Dan.
Yep. On the Patriots side, Ramondre Stevenson's still out. Ezekiel Elliott's going to get the bulk of the touches out there for sure. We saw he had a really great game last week
Yep.
against the Steelers. That's a tough rush defense. So, Chiefs better tighten up with their front seven on that case. Christian Barmore, defensive lineman, Trent Brown, right tackle for that offensive line. Both of them did not practice this week and have a questionable tag. Usually Friday is the indicator on whether or not a player is
Right.
going to play. Those two guys are impact type of guys. So we'll see kind of what happens with them. And then even furthermore, the wide receivers for that team, all of them were limited this week. Juju,
Sheesh.
Tyquan Thornton, Devontae Parker, they had
Yep.
limited participation throughout the week. So that's something
How things go. So, for
There
the
we go.
Patriots, hasn't
A
gone
little
well.
technical stuff. We're back.
Yeah. For the Patriots, hasn't gone well, right? Injuries play a huge role in how your team's going to play and continue to have success throughout the year. Um, But moving into best bets here, the spread right now is Kansas City minus 9.5. Pretty big, to be honest with you, especially with what we've seen in the last few weeks. Teams against New England.
Mhm.
Obviously, Bill Belichick's going to want to try to close that gap, and he does a very good job of closing the gap on the spreads.
Yeah.
Right now, the over/under sitting at 37.5. This is a tough one to balance, really, when you look at the spreads and you look at the over/unders and everything with the way New England's played solid defense. The Chiefs have struggled on offense. Chiefs have a solid defense themselves. Patriots have a really terrible offense. So this could go like a 30-24 game and kind of blow it out of the water. It could be like a 13-7, 13-3 kind of a game, right? And so I think this is
tricky.
a tough one to play. It really is, as far as a gambling aspect. So.
It is a tricky one, and it was 9.5 on DraftKings last night. We saw it drop all the way down to 8.5. It's moving back up to 9. Last we looked, I know on our graphic here we got the 8.5, but it's just been moving a ton. So you gotta. Me personally, I'm probably not touching this game because of our offensive struggles, the capability of a Bill Belichick defense,
Right.
our defense as well, their offense. I think you're most safe taking the under in this scenario at 39.5,
I
but
would agree.
with the spread, that's just one that I'm probably not going to touch or mess with. But the rest of the game, there's a lot of props that you can play off of, right? The touchdown props are pretty solid in terms of value. Kelsey at minus 105 being the favorite when it comes to anytime touchdowns, but with Ezekiel Elliott, likely the offense is going to run through him.
Yep.
That's plus 140, even
Love
if it's a
that.
late game touchdown.
Love that.
That's a lot of value there.
Yep.
And then Rashee Rice at plus 175.
Love that too.
I mean, we'll talk about some of the receiving totals here in a minute, but as far as, with no Pacheco being in the mix, there's no telling where those touchdowns are going to come from outside of Kelsey and Rashee Rice. And those two guys, I mean, you got to have the most confidence in them being the ones. Rashee Rice caught a touchdown this last game. We know Kelsey can pop off at any moment for a touchdown. I like the value there for sure. Maybe throw it in a parlay or something.
Yep, absolutely. That's a good point there with the parlay. But Rashee Rice, I think that's almost a no-brainer for the 175 touchdown for me. He's obviously elevated his game every week. It feels
He's
like
a prime
for the last
read.
6 weeks. Yeah,
he's been a prime read in the red zone.
And so talking about Isaiah Pacheco being out, it's going to be interesting to see what the goal line offense looks like because really we've evolved our goal line offense within the last 5 weeks or so to where we do run the ball in goal line.
Yeah.
Isaiah Pacheco is getting that ball, right? So it could evolve now. And I I can't remember last week how that played out for the offense, what they were playing in the goal line, but are they going to stick to the run with CEH in the goal line, or are they going to look to kind of work those shifty passes and those elaborate route trees inside the 10-yard line, right?
You're
So
going to see one of those shovel
yeah,
passes off of a
right,
fake, those play action,
right.
those boot plays where someone's coming over on a crosser. Any of that, I think, is in play.
Yep, yep, yep. Going into the rushing prop bets here for CEH, he's looking at 50.5 yards. Zeke's looking at 59.5 yards. And then Jerick McKinnon's at 11.5 yards. I think Jerick McKinnon, that's a no-brainer. I'm probably jumping all over that over
Okay.
just because he could get a mix in there. He did get a lot more
He
plays
did.
last week.
He
And
got some
so,
touches,
yeah, and
some
we could
some
see
handoffs.
him, really, that's just one break.
Yeah,
You break one, you get past the second level, you're on the over on that Jerick McKinnon,
right.
11.5 yards there. So I think CEH is going to he's going to have to be a huge role in the offense today and being successful. So it'd be interesting to see that. And like you said with Zeke, last week he had a big week.
Yeah.
59.5 is not too far for Zeke. So
Not shabby, not too shabby for sure. I think a lot of Zeke's play last week too came in the screen game, which is surprising. Dallas really didn't get him involved like that a ton, and New England's finding a way to do it. No, Ramondre Stevenson's kind of pigeonholing them into that scenario where they're
right.
having to shoot the ball out in the flats to Zeke. But CEH, that's one that the total is pretty low for him running in that offense. Obviously, with Pacheco, you feel a lot more comfortable him hitting that
Yeah.
number. But yeah, he's just going to have to find some vision in this scenario. The New England Patriots are notoriously stiff when it comes to the running game.
Yep.
So I'm not a huge fan of the over there. With McKinnon, his rushing total 11.5, his receiving total 17.5, just kind of segueing into that. I would be more interested in looking at what his total combined yardage would look like.
Sure.
If we're just doing some math here and adding the two numbers, maybe it's 29.5 total yards. I love that over
Yep.
for
That's a good point.
total receiving and rushing as opposed to sticking to one or the other.
Yep.
But that's kind of a play that I would take. I think McKinnon's definitely going to get more play in this situation where we're maybe lining him up on a third down scenario, hitting him on a
Right.
little boot or something, or a little bubble or something.
Yep.
Like I like that.
And in a game where we're playing against a tough defense, we could see more of those 3rd and 7+, right? And that's where
Yeah.
he could get those screens or those bubbles out into the flat and try to get him in space with somebody, maybe a linebacker, whoever it is, covering that flat, and try to make him make those plays on the outside. So yeah, that's a good point. We could see a lot of those 3rd and longs, 3rd and 6, 3rd and 5 kind of plays where he's going to play a role in that offense. So outside of that, with McKinnon receiving, Travis Kelce's looking at 65.5 yards. Rashee Rice is looking at 57.5 yards, and then I kind of like the Rashee Rice there. He's like I said earlier, he's being consistent, man.
Yeah.
Travis Kelce, when he's hot, right? He's hitting 100+ when he's hot. So I don't know if Taylor Swift's going to be at the game this weekend, and I'm not sure how much impact that has anymore. If we can talk about those stats on whether if she's at the game, he's catching 1,000 yards or whatever it may be.
The law of averages are playing back.
Yeah, right, yeah, yeah. So I see both of those again, and we kind of keep talking about Isaiah Pacheco being out, and he's kind of this focal point of our
For
offense
good
now.
reason,
It runs
yeah.
through Isaiah Pacheco, and when you have a guy like that out who's been a solid running back for the Chiefs, you tend to push those yards to other players, and not necessarily just on the ground game, but
Right.
we may pass 5 or 10 more times now instead of run the ball 5 or 10 more times. So
And that's honestly my fear going into this game, not to get too far into what we're going to be getting into with the game, but I don't want us to be this one-dimensional team because that's how Bill Belichick's able to isolate that one dimension that
Right.
you have and really key on it. Like we know Travis Kelce is going to get bracketed, right? We
Right.
know Rashee Rice is going to get the number one corner assignment on
Yep.
all of his routes. So really, it's going to be on some of these other receivers to take some of those Pacheco yardages and convert them. Jerick McKinnon at 17.5 is the third highest total for receiving yards on the Chiefs team. No MVS, no Sky Moore, no Tony is higher than that level. And I know I'm going down the depth chart here with some guys, but
Good night.
Any one of those guys, if they're able to eclipse 15.5 yards on their total today, you're going to cash out on a bet. just kind of looking at it that way. If you want to put some money on one of those guys,
Watson.
I'm going Watson too. Honestly, Watson for an anytime touchdown. If you're wanting some real value, he is looked at in the red zone quite a bit as well.
Yeah.
But it's going to be on, Rice to make some plays, really grow up a little bit more, a little bit faster. He's kind of been forced in that situation so far, and Kelsey to do what he does and beat that bracket coverage any chance he can get.
Yep.
Let's look at Mahomes.
I like him.
1.5 touchdowns for 1.5 touchdowns for Patrick Mahomes. According to DraftKings, that's what the total's looking like there. Rushing yards 21.5 and passing yards 255.5. I know you like him. I like him too. Which one of those bets are you leaning more towards?
I like the rushing yards, and specifically because he's had, it's really hit or miss with Pat Mahomes on rushing yards for the season. So he's had several games where he has had 35 plus yards rushing, and that's, obviously he's not getting drawn up for the QB. The QB
they're not
draw.
designed.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, they're not designed runs.
But he does get it's 3rd and 8. The pocket collapse and everybody's covered down, and he runs for the 9 or 10 yards to get the first down, right?
Yep.
He does that several times a game. So I personally love 21.5 yards. I'm taking the over on that one if I were going to play. I think he sits somewhere around 30 to 40 yards this game, just because New England is going to establish that pressure, and they will get pressure on Patrick Mahomes. Despite the positive play we've seen from the offensive line the last 5, 6, 7 weeks. I think specifically Judon's going to be able to create some magic there, but I like the 21.5 yards rushing.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know how many first downs he converts a game just on those broken plays, because I feel like he's really good at finding where the marker is, extending the ball, and converting that. So he does that 2 times. That's maybe 15 yards on the conservative end right there. He busts out another carry and you hit your over on that. So that's one of those things that I'm definitely interested in seeing, and I do like that total for sure. The passing yard scares me. Right, Mahomes against those tougher defenses this year, having limited receiving options, that's one of those things that's been a little bit tougher for him to hit the over on. But the 2 touchdowns, I think that's very feasible. So
Agreed,
those 2 are my favorite. The passing yardage is a little iffy for me.
Agreed. So looking into the weather report for the game,
it's going to impact your bets.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it always does in New England too, man.
For sure.
Starting in October.
Yeah, right. That's when the open season comes for any kind of random thing to happen.
Yeah. So the wind's going to be west-northwest at 25 to 35 miles per hour. So it's going to be we could potentially see Bucker having some trouble this weekend, right? So he's been 100% throughout the year so far with 25 to 35 mile per hour winds, man. That's going to be tough to make those 40-plus yard kicks, right? So
be careful with your field goal props today.
Yeah.
Be careful with your extra point props, any of those kicks. This is where that half-point kicker always comes into play whenever you get a total from Vegas, right? When somebody misses that extra point, that's how you end up falling a half point below, or they miss that field goal or whatever the case might be. So there could be a lot of implications there for your bets, but also for the game in general.
Yeah, so Laredo, if you're listening live right now, think about this, buddy, because I know you're playing those kickers every weekend, every game, buddy. You better think about this wind up in New England, man.
It's a real deal.
Yeah. Patriots, let's talk about the game. So how did the Chiefs win? How did the Patriots win? Let's start with the Patriots.
Dude, the Patriots, what they're going to have to do is exactly kind of what we talked about when we were going over the bets, right? They're going to have to limit Kelsey with that bracket coverage, putting a linebacker on him underneath, having that safety spy over the top so they can follow him throughout the field, make sure he doesn't get too vertical on you. Having Rashee Rice manned up, that guy has to be successful, obviously, in those man coverage situations, and force the Chiefs to push the ball in those other areas, right? Get the run game established if you can with CEH or with Jerick McKinnon. Get those other receivers involved if you can, if they can catch the ball. Those kinds of things are going to be huge for limiting. Yeah, big IF. So it's going to be huge for the Patriots there to figure that out and execute, right? It's one thing coming into a game with a game plan, which I'm sure that's what Belichick's plan is going to be. But it's another thing to execute and pull it off. So that's going to be a big piece, I think.
Yeah. So I think outside of that, that's pretty technical dive in there.
Yeah.
winning special teams, I think, is going to be a huge key for New England to be able to win this game. And when I'm talking about special teams, it's really like field position. So if you can punt the ball, obviously New England's going to punt the ball today because they have a lot of troubles on offense, and the
Right.
Chiefs have a solid defense. But if they can continuously trap Patrick Mahomes within the 15, 10, 5-yard line, it's going to make it that much more difficult for Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense to be able to drive down every single drive and make those key plays and really limit the third downs for Patrick Mahomes. But
Yeah.
I think the percentage of successful touchdowns on a drive that's within the 10-yard line is like 20% or some 15% or somewhere
Yeah.
around there. League wide, that's not a Chiefs stat, that's an NFL stat. But
That's the average. Yep.
yeah, I mean it's tough to drive down the football or drive down the field in the NFL and make plays and be successful within the 10-yard line. So, and especially with the wind, if you get that 4th and 1, 4th and 2, somewhere on the 30-yard line or 25-yard line,
Yep.
maybe a go for it situation with the wind. So, winning special teams is going to be key for the Patriots going into this game.
Absolutely.
Also, a big part of football is scoring the football. So,
get the 7.
yeah. So, or the 3, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Just anything other than 0.
Right.
If the Patriots want to win the game, they got to figure out a way to score the football. And whether that's through special teams, that's through defense, or their offense wants to put together one field goal and the special teams or defense does the rest, they have to find a way to put points up on the scoreboard.
Right.
And obviously the offense has had struggles with that this year.
They've had a lot of problems.
So they're going to have to find other ways to put those points up on the board.
Yeah.
Again, special teams, defense, they have the opportunity with the defense that they have to be able to score with that unit. So, and with the struggling Chiefs offense, right? So,
Right.
They have that opportunity.
Well, I mean, if you look at the Patriots' last few games too, they had 21 points in their win against the Steelers. I think it was 21-13. The other 5 games before that, they didn't eclipse 13 points in any of those games. You're not going to win many football games on this side of 1955 doing that. So, unfortunately for them, they just haven't been able to convert it a ton. So, taking advantage of any turnover situations and scoring that is going to be huge for them to supplement that offense too.
Yep.
Which I know you mentioned that, and I think if there is a situation where the Chiefs do not come out on top in this game, there would be some sort of scoring turnover on the defensive side involved in that equation.
Yep. Okay, Dan. Chiefs. Why we're really here. Chiefs keys to victory. Where do we start?
Dude, it starts with the offense, man, and that's been our Achilles heel, unfortunately, which is not what we're used to at all as Chiefs fans, and I'm guaranteeing you Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are not used to being that Achilles heel on the team either.
Yeah, right.
And so getting up early, putting up points, overcoming whatever obstacles Belichick's going to throw our way early on in the game, making them adjust to what we're bringing is going to be huge. Because if they're the ones adjusting, that means we're the ones controlling the tone
right.
when it comes to our offense. And so it starts there, right? Putting up points, getting a touchdown right off the bat. Typically we like to defer that kick, right? Let our offense take the ball after.
Right.
I don't know if it's even worth it to maybe switch that up and set the tone on the offensive side of the ball because we just haven't taken advantage of giving them the ball first the way that we typically do. And so maybe getting the ball first and trying that out could be a way to jumpstart the offense, saying, hey, we have confidence in you to go down there and get some points right now.
Yep.
That could be a way to look at it.
Well, I think there's also value in that in playing a really poor offense, the New England Patriots, is that once you go up a score, they're continuously feeling that pressure of, man, we have to score now or Patrick Mahomes is just going to light us up all game, right? And we won't be able to come back and have an opportunity to win this game. So I think I kind of like that play, man. And like you said, Andy Reid's played it one way since we've seen him in Kansas City and deferring there. And I think you should give him a call.
It's worth the shot.
Throw the idea.
I mean, it's worth the shot.
Yeah, I agree. I think disciplined football is going to play a huge key in how the Chiefs have success, not just today, but the rest of the season, right? So, and there's 2 key factors there is turnovers and penalties, right? So you have to limit the turnovers. You got to win the turnover battle with whatever team that you're playing. And then you have to limit the penalties, not altogether, but you have to limit the penalties that kill your drive, specifically on offense, right? So there cannot be any holding on a first down run on 3rd and long or 3rd and short or whatever. The 3rd down penalties have to stop. and that's
They're drive killers, man.
they are, man, and it kind of trickles into the rest of the game, and you see the offense continue to struggle the rest of the game
Right.
because of those plays. Everybody's afraid to make that mistake, whether it's a turnover or it's a penalty for holding or offensive offsides. That one's gonna stick in my brain for a couple of
Oh,
years, I
for
think.
sure.
But
That's like a, PTSD kind of call.
yeah,
You see it again, you're like, not again.
yeah,
Like,
right.
no, 100%. And I think, on the other side of that coin with disciplined football, like obviously you don't want to get in a point where you're killing a drive on third down because of a penalty or a false start
Yep.
or a situation where a touchdown gets called back off the board. But at the same time, you can't put the team in a situation where that call is going to affect the result of the game, right?
Right.
And so if that call does happen, which inevitably they do, there's not many call or games you get through without some sort of holding call or
Right.
false
Yep.
start or whatever the case might be. It's just not letting that be the deciding factor in that game, which is what's happened in our last three losses, which is why it's such a hot button issue for
Yeah.
fans right now,
Right.
right? Got a touchdown call back against the Bills. We got the missed PI in the Packers game. And then there was another call in the Eagles game that was suspicious as well, or, game changing, game
Yep.
altering,
Right.
rather. So there's those kinds of things that ultimately our team didn't perform well enough earlier in the game
Right.
to negate that from being a factor.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge factor is what we've been able to see the last couple of years is that whether the calls have gone our way or not, we've been able to overcome those obstacles and continue to win at football games. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean that's a great point. That kind of leads me into my next point is that the Chiefs have to come out with a whole new attitude. So we've been flat. You can feel it through the TV, man.
Oh, yeah.
That like this team is just not jiving together. They're not coming out with an attitude. That we're gonna come out cracky in the mouth and
They
we're
come
gonna
out worried.
yeah, right. And it shakes me to my bones too. I'm coming out worried every Sunday. I'm thinking how we're going to lose this game. So I think the way things have shaped out in the NFL and specifically for the Chiefs so far this year is that we are kind of the bad guy now, right? We're
Yeah.
we're the enemy for everybody.
Or the
And
villain.
yeah, we're the villain. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And I think we need to come out, embrace that,
Yeah.
and stick it to everybody, man, and come out and have an attitude that it doesn't matter how the officiating is going to be. It doesn't matter. The fines don't matter. The penalties don't matter. We're going to come out and we're going to smack you in the mouth, and you're going to know about it at the end of the game because we're going to be up 20 or 21 points, right? So I think the team needs that.
Right.
And
No, they do.
maybe it doesn't happen every single week for the rest of the year, but I think we need to come out, make a statement, even though it's a bad New England team, make a statement against Bill Belichick and
Yep.
say, hey, it doesn't matter who you are, we're going to come out here, crack you in the mouth, and play solid football.
Absolutely. Punch in the mouth, set the tone,
Yeah.
and ride the wave.
Set the tone.
Yeah.
Love that.
Ride
Yeah.
the wave.
Ride the wave.
I mean, as far as the game goes, right? We talked about scenarios that can get us into a winning position or a losing position. Obviously, a lot of it comes down to fundamentals, right? Playing a clean game, turnover battle, those kinds of things. What do you think the ultimate result of this game is going to be? Good, bad, or indifferent?
I think there's gonna be moments in the game where Chiefs fans are thinking, "Man, are we gonna do this again?" Inevitably, I think we're gonna win the football game. I'm not too worried about winning the game, but I don't think it's gonna be a 28-10 game. I don't think it's
Yeah.
gonna be a 31-14 game. I think it's gonna be somewhat close. I honestly think it's gonna be a low-scoring game, like a 20-10. I don't see a lot of fireworks. I think it's gonna be a kind of a slow game. But I think that it's not gonna be a quick, hey, we're going to score 2 tutties and be up and you're going to chase us all game. I think there's going to be a little bit of back and forth throughout the game. I think we will see turnovers this game with 2 great defenses playing today. So I don't expect perfection on the opposite side of the football, but I do expect a win. At the end of the day, I do expect the Chiefs to pull out a win here and kind of get the wheels turning and make a move into January that's going to be a little more solid than what we've seen so far.
Yeah, man. I'm all on board for that. Yeah. What's your score prediction?
2010. I think that's
20-10?
what I'm rolling with. Yeah, I think I think there's going to be a lull in football at some point in the game, whether it's quarter 2 and 3, where there's kind of really nothing going on, and maybe a trash touchdown at the end there. But I think it's going to be pretty slow. Maybe a 1, 2, and 3 score for the Chiefs, and then kind of lay off the gas like Andy Reid's offense typically does in the second half. So I think that's kind of what I'm looking at as 2010.
Okay. I could see it. I mean, A low scoring game is definitely in the cards. Obviously, Vegas agrees with you there, right? The total being under 40 is not something that you see typically with a Chiefs game. Um, where I'm at personally, like I think Belichick is going to make things difficult on us. He has a good track record defending Travis Kelce, scheming things up defensively against him, and he's been our only saving grace. You know what I mean?
Right.
Throughout the season offensively.
Yep.
So he's going to make it tough on him. He's going to make it tough on a rookie, Rashee Rice. Bill Belichick's record against rookies is
Great point.
well stated as well.
Great point.
So it's going to be on the offense to get other people involved, and I think they do some of that, right? MVS, Tony, those guys, they've got a big chip on their shoulder right now.
Yep.
I can foresee this being a situation where one of those guys has not a 100-yard game, but 40, 50 yards. That could be enough to turn the tide
Yep.
in those situations,
Agreed.
getting them some points in those areas. And, when it comes to the defense, we have a great defense. Their quarterback, not all that great.
Yeah.
So I can see this being a situation where maybe they force a turnover and get a score.
Yep.
So because of that defensive element that I'm throwing into my prediction, I'm going 27-13. Not far off from your prediction initially, but I foresee a defensive touchdown, whether it's a strip sack or a pick six or something like that, or a situation where we're getting an interception on their side of the field. They've set us up in short yardage scenario, and we punch it in that way. So I kind of like it from that angle as well. Their offense doesn't really worry me, especially with the receivers being hampered.
I agree.
So 27-13 Chiefs, baby.
Yeah. I will say I have like a little small sliver of hope to where I'm thinking like, man, maybe everything that's kind of piled up the last few weeks with the negative attention towards the Chiefs.
Oh yeah.
And everything that really came to a head last week with Patrick Mahomes and Andy kind of addressing the officiating. I think there is a little sliver of opportunity where things really pop off and
bust through.
Yeah, we bust through the ceiling. Offense really figures it out, and then a defense continues on the stretch that they're on. The play calling elevates. Everything really comes together for the Chiefs. We have a strong last 4 weeks, and everybody's Christmas is jolly in Chiefs land.
Yeah, please. That's all I'm hoping for.
Yeah.
All I want for Christmas is
Four-game
another
win
game in
streak
Arrowhead
Super
for the
Bowl.
playoffs. Like, give me an AFC title game, just one more at least.
Yeah, absolutely. So
So
things have picked up here at the Atlas. There's a lot of people coming in. There's
Love
a lot of food laid out over here. I know the beers on the other side of the bar are starting to sling. I know Dan and I are going to go have a beer here soon. And
I need a frosty beverage.
This is the place to be for the game today. Make sure everybody comes down if you're in the Excelsior area, or if you're sitting on your couch by yourself with Cheeto dust on your fingers. Come down here and have some beers.
There's time to get down here for sure. We
yeah.
got about 38 minutes until the game's starting.
Yeah.
So plenty of food so you can make a plate, like you said. And let's go Chiefs, baby. Let's wrap this thing up. Thank you, Atlas, for having us out.
Let's go.
Right on.